from the last time we spoke, I have been really strong on. I think the NFL was leaning more to an offensive game. I think defensive coaches, no matter your Hall of Fame like Bill Belichick, your Mike Tomlins, your smart defensive coaches, they are starting to feel a little bit outdated. We're seeing quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert not be able to win games with defensive coaches where Zach Taylor and Brian Dable are winning games with Tommy DeVito and Jake Browning. Um, I mean, what's your whole take on just the way the game is going? And I mean, we're seeing teams now with a bunch of backup quarterbacks. We're seeing defensive coaches can't win with them, and we're seeing Cincinnati stay in the playoff hunt with Jake Browning.
Right. Well, I think it's funny because it's been so long since we've talked. In fact, we were talking about the draft process, and it was right after the draft happened, after Trevor Lawrence got drafted. And I was telling you, I think he might be a bust because his head coach is Urban Meyer. Well, that didn't last very long, did it? But in terms of the defensive stuff, you just brought up some very great defensive coaches. But I want to look at a pretty bad one, Brandon Staley, that just got fired
today
in LA. Yeah, exactly. Today. I think that's the best example of what you're talking about. You got a defensive guy that comes in and, people say defense wins championships. I understand why the Chargers were so excited about Staley at first, but he didn't work out. And, he was a big defensive guy, and there was a big spat between him and some journalist earlier in the year. I think it might have been just a couple of weeks ago where he was telling them, I'm going to keep calling the defensive plays. I'm going to keep calling the defensive plays. And that, that to me just rang in my head. Well, Brandon, at the end of the day, it is an offensive league. And if you can't even call your defense to stop these offenses like he clearly couldn't last night was the perfect example of what you're talking about, even though there was a lot of defensive scores. But at the end of the day, things have changed a lot. And, you brought up Zach Taylor and the Bengals, and you brought up, I want to bring up, maybe it's because I'm a homer, I want to bring up Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah,
and what he's been able to do this year.
Okay, so I was just about to get to Stefanski. So what's
Yeah.
done? Obviously here in Cleveland, and I'm gonna admit it here, I have been a guy who for the last year or so, I have not been the biggest fan of Stefanski.
Yeah.
I think he gets way too cute with his play calling.
Of course.
I think that sometimes he tries to outthink the room. There's times where he doesn't look motivated on the sideline. But with that being said, and even to start this year, I kept saying they're losing games they're not supposed to. The offense looks horrible with whatever quarterback they've had, but in the gauntlet of an AFC that is the AFC, you've had four quarterbacks start this year. Two of them are glorified practice squad guys. One was just done watching, football from his parents' house every Sunday because he was basically retired out of the league. And then one, obviously, let's be honest, wasn't really healthy since week 3, even though he played a couple games after that. The fact that the Browns are, what are they now, 8-5 at the time of this recording, something like that. I said, if Kevin Stefanski gets this team to the playoffs, he's coach of the year, whether people in Cleveland like it or not.
Yes, you're absolutely right about that. And the thing about it is, I 100% agree with the Kevin Stefanski criticisms. I really do. But I think every NFL head coach is up to some criticisms. Even right now, we look at Bill Belichick, the greatest potentially coach of all time, and people are talking about how the hell does Robert Kraft bring him into his office and fire this guy? And look, all coaches have ups and downs, but I think Kevin Stefanski is in his best era right now. And I'll tell you this, in regard to his emotions, he didn't show a lot of emotions throughout the last couple of years. This year, potentially in the year he's faced the most adversity, I've seen more emotion out of him than I've seen in a long time, out of really a lot of Cleveland Browns head coaches. And I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from him. Again, like you said, if he takes this team to the playoffs, which at this point, it's I think the percentages are something like over 80%. If that's the case, he will win NFL Coach of the Year, and he deserves it. Now, you said 4 quarterbacks. I think it's also important to mention 7 total quarterback changes as well this year.
That's a good
That's a
point.
lot. And yes,
Yep.
that's between 4 quarterbacks, but that's a lot.
And
And you
some
can't
of
get
that
it.
is on Stefanski though for bouncing
Sure,
back and forth.
sure, sure.
When
Yes,
when
absolutely.
they started PJ Walker that one game, we're all saying, "What are they doing?" And then they went back to DTR, and
Right,
even the last couple weeks with Flacco was like, "Well, we're not going to tell anybody if we're starting Flacco or not." It's like everybody knows you're starting Flacco. Like
right. Of
it's the
course.
weirdness of that. But yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. In week 2, we saw Nick Chubb go down with that knee injury. And I think I was the only person alive based in the city of Cleveland that said the Browns are going to be fine. If there's one position that you can lose in the NFL, it's at the running back position. I
Yep.
don't care. I don't care how great Nick Chubb is. Um, we've seen great NFL teams. I mean, when's the last time an NFL team that won a Super Bowl had a 1,000-yard rusher? It just doesn't happen.
Right.
So I threw out a ton of scenarios last year when I said at the end of the year, like I would shop around Nick Chubb. I like the fact that they still had Kareem on at the time. I thought Jerome Ford would get more of a run, but I said you're never going to get more value on a Chubb than you do right now. And
Right.
obviously he went down. So I think the Browns have had such good running backs for such a long time. The fan base thinks you need a great running back. And to me, and I said this, if Deshaun Watson, you pay him $230 million, you're not going to put the ball in a running back's hand. You're putting the ball in your damn quarterback's hands.
Right. Well, and I completely agree with that, Brandon. And you see what Kevin Stefanski really wants to do with his playbook with Joe Flacco in right now. He wants to pass the ball. He really, really does. And look, after last year, after Chubb had another, I believe he had over 1,000 yards, probably over a great year again last year. Fans still wanted to trade him, and I know that you're an Eagles fan, correct? But
Yes.
you are just a fan looking on, and you thought maybe it might be smart to trade him. I wanted to keep him, but that's just because I'm a homer and I like keeping guys that I like. However, there would have been a lot of value in it. Now, on the other hand, there probably still could be, but you wouldn't have gotten what you would have gotten last year. With that being said, with Deshaun, I think he really, hopefully, when he comes back next year, we'll be able to see some more passing. I wanted to really see a 300-yard game from Deshaun this year. I really, really did. That was one of the barometers I was looking for from him and Kevin Stefanski. But we've seen it with Joe Flacco, but I really wanted to see that, and we didn't see that. It was close with that second Ravens game, and it was close against the Titans, but we really didn't see that. But I think that's what Stefanski likes to do. I was going to say this earlier. I'm going to say it now. People, talk about the tree that Stefanski came from, whether that be Gary Kubiak or whoever. I think he really likes to emulate or copy Andy Reid. I think he wants to be Andy Reid 2.0. And you said he gets a little too silly sometimes. He does this, he does that. I think Browns fans recognize when he does that. And I think they say, you know, people like Andy Reid can do that. People like them can do that, but you haven't maybe earned doing that sort of silly stuff yet. And that silly stuff, even though it has to be executed by the players, does affect the game, and it has caused some losses this year and in the past as well. So yeah, I completely agree. But with all that being said, I do think Stefanski likes to think of himself as more of an Andy Reid type, and he likes to get a little cute, even in times when maybe you shouldn't, or when they're up by a lot, or whatever, and you're like, "What the hell is this guy doing?"
I've compared him a lot to actually Matt LaFleur in Green Bay.
That's a good one too. That's a good one
They
too.
run a very similar scheme. And I said Stefanski and LaFleur are very similar to where they're very good on script the first couple drives. And then it like takes them a couple quarters to adjust. Second, third quarter, the offense isn't great, but their defense most of the time hangs on. Uh,
Right.
Before we get to the NBA, I want to ask you a draft question. Uh,
Okay.
this draft is fascinating. Um, I'm just going to ask you this. You're the general manager of the Chicago Bears. I
Ooh.
think they're the most fascinating team in the offseason. Listen, when Justin Fields came out of college, I was not the biggest fan. I thought he was going to be a very good quarterback, but I thought really, like a lot of these quarterbacks, as we've talked about a lot, it depends on where you land. I did not think Matt Nagy was a terrible head coach. I didn't understand the move. I didn't understand going on and getting Eberflus. They got DJ Moore this year, and over the last month, Justin Fields has probably played the best football he's ever played. The problem is going to be you're going to get that number one pick, and there is a potential transcendent quarterback on the board in Caleb Williams. I think Justin Fields is going to be very good. I don't think he has the ceiling Caleb does. If I had to guess right now, for some reason, I think the Bears are going to hang on to both Fields and Eberflus. I wouldn't. I would start fresh because I think you're just going to catch yourself in this retread over and over of being 7-10 every single year. But what would you do?
I think I would probably. I've seen mock drafts and I've seen trade. Even more importantly, for what I'm going to say, trade scenarios where a talent like Caleb Williams, maybe one of the best prospects we've seen in a very long time at quarterback. I will say this. This is just such a tough question, but if I were the general manager, I would likely trade the picks because I do like Justin Fields. I really do. I think he was, in his draft coming out, one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks. Obviously, there were some great quarterbacks in that class, but I think he was still, especially coming out of Ohio State, just a pro-ready quarterback. And I was really excited to see him. And I still do like watching him, but I think he's been held back by a couple of things. And look, the Bears could use some pieces all over the place. I think they're 4-9. They're 5-8 right now. They're 5-8 right now. They could use pieces all over the place. But I will say this: there is obviously a benefit in trading maybe a Justin Fields or some other valuable players, and then just drafting Caleb Williams. Either way, I think there's going to be some sort of trade that happens. Now, what could happen is they keep Justin Fields and then they just draft Caleb Williams and then just see what happens. Because did the Cardinals do this with Josh Rosen and Kyler Murray?
They traded away Rosen though.
That's right. That's right. They did. They traded him away. I thought for some reason they kept him, but no. But with all that being said, I do have a feeling there's going to be some sort of juicy trade, whether that means Chicago gets. Now, I wouldn't do it for anything less than 2 firsts, 2 seconds, maybe even 3 firsts, honestly, because we know Caleb Williams is going to be an instant starter wherever he goes, most likely. So I just have a feeling that there's going to be some sort of big trade that happens, whatever happens. And if I were the general manager, I'd likely trade those picks. Or if you just want to stay put and then just draft the best available, the next best available player, that's also a good option too.
And I said a month ago, if I was Chicago, I would have hoped for their sake that they would have kept losing because I would have drafted Caleb number 1. And if I had the number 3 or number 4 pick, I would have found a way to go get Marvin Harrison Jr. And I would have had Caleb, Marvin, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet with a new, hopefully, offensive coach. That's what I would have done. I think that's a dream scenario. But now, unfortunately, we saw they just beat Detroit this past week. So it looks like
that was a big win too.
Yeah,
and now they're coming to Cleveland, and Cleveland needs to take them seriously too, because
no, I completely
looks like they're coming to play.